It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Okay, so what do we want to talk about? R. Kelly. We all saw in the news this week, because it was pretty prominent in the news, that he was convicted on these state charges in the state of New York, all kinds of sexual abuse charges of underage girls. Sentencing is like 10 to 100 years. So Mr. Kelly has not had a good week. We can say that for sure. Okay. Now, my personal involvement with the R. Kelly situation comes about way back. Okay, way back. It was around 2002, in early 2002. That it became public that there was this R. Kelly sex tape that was released to the Chicago Sun-Times. And I remember when I heard that this tape was released, and I heard the details of the tape, I was shocked. Because the actual activity on the tape is not just an R. Kelly sex tape, as we had heard the rumors floating around. This was actually a child molestation tape where he had taped himself urinating into the mouth of a child, little 13-year-old girl. So this was early in 2002, this tape came out and hit the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, my involvement with this tape came in early 2001, almost a year earlier. And people I know and people that I worked with at the time had contacted me and said, "Hey, Ed, have you heard about this R. Kelly sex tape?" And I says, "No, I haven't. What do you got? What's going on?" He says, "Well, there's some people calling around and they're shopping around this R. Kelly sex tape. And we've seen screenshots and still shots, and it sure looks like R. Kelly's face with the beard and the sunglasses. It sure seems to be him." So what my involvement and my role in this, to go back a little further back, right around this time, see, back in the late 90s, during the time of the Scott Peterson case, I was hired by some people surrounding that case to do some internet investigations to locate and identify people from their internet postings and from their email address and from anonymous websites. And I was very successful in that. And what happened was that some of the attorneys in that case, if you recall, some of their names involved with that case, heard about my work in that, and they were all impressed with it. So they were giving a lot of recommendations. They were sending a lot of referrals to me. Okay. Now, some of the attorneys in that case I've worked with after that, and some I have not. That was my involvement with the Scott Peterson case. I know a lot of people seem to think that, I worked for the prosecution, I worked for the defense. No, not at all. Okay, but I was recommended. I was given referrals and recommendations by Mark Garagos, even though I had never worked for him directly. Somehow he became aware of my work. But others, all the other attorneys in that situation too, was aware of the work I did in the Scott Peterson case, tracing emails, locating, identifying people from an email address, locating people from an online website, being able to get my way behind a secret paywall, and where people only like the elites in these communications are allowed to go behind and communicate. I was able to pull that off. Okay, and there was other cases I had worked on too. Same kind of situation. Back in those days, I was doing a lot of email work. So I was contacted and I was told, "Hey, Ed, there's these people out there and they're shopping around this R. Kelly sex tape. All we have for them is a phone number and an email address and an IP address. What can you do? Can you locate these people? Can you identify these people? So I'd done some preliminary work on this, and I was able to narrow it down that they were in the Chicago area and at a location that was significant, that indicated that they would have, that it was possible that they would have access to this kind of inside information at R. Kelly's address. That they somehow would have access to R. Kelly's information. This wasn't some off-the-wall person contacting us from Hawaii or overseas trying to make wild claims. We were able to connect it to people that had a legitimate connection to the R. Kelly situation and his employment and his living situation. But once again, we were totally unaware that this was a sex tape of an underage girl. And it seemed like there were two paths of negotiation going on here, is what I can tell you. One was that there was this offer of this sex tape to the tabloids to market this tape and see what it was worth to embarrass Mr. Kelly in the public, air in tabloid publications with this salacious kind of material. But there was another avenue of monetizing this tape that seemed to be contacting people around R. Kelly and his management and his different people who were making money off of him, people who had an interest to lose should this tape be exposed, like a blackmail type situation. Okay, so we were aware of these two levels of negotiation going on with these tapes. And then what I think happened was, because the tapes did ultimately wind up anonymously at the offices of the Chicago Sun-Times. So what I think happened was, and just my experience and my personal expertise in this area, was that the people who were trying to blackmail had gotten too far along in the process. And for the drop, the money drop, the negotiation for the money split, was getting, when it got to that stage of the negotiation, that they says, okay, I'll give you some identifying information about myself. You can transfer this money. And that's when all hell broke loose. And the hammer came down on them, and they were told, hey, listen, this is a crime. This is extortion. This is blackmail. And they said, oh, no. And they turned it over for free to the Chicago Sun-Times rather than risk prosecution in seeking any kind of monetary gain from these embarrassing tapes, because it's illegal. Okay, most people, have heard of extortion and blackmail, but even to release to threaten to release embarrassing information about someone is a violation of those blackmail extortion laws. So that's something to be considered. So this is way, way, way back in 2002. Everyone knew about this tape. People out there knew about this tape. Okay, like people in the media knew about it. People in the music industry knew about it. People in the legal community knew about it, and other people who are familiar with brokering these kind of tapes and this kind of information was aware of this. There was an investigation, and I believe he got off scot-free on that. So 2002 was a very bad year for Mr. R. Kelly. And I believe he was arrested for counts of possession of child pornography, both in Florida and Chicago. Images, and some of the images were related to the young lady that was on this tape. And then the story goes, and I believe this is even in some of these documentary films. I've only seen one, and that was the one recently, the Netflix series that starts out where it talks about how... poor R. Kelly. I guess his name is Richard. Oh, poor Richard. Oh, he was abused as a child too. So was I. Our whole family were all being abused as little kids. Trying to gather sympathy for R. Kelly, which I have none. I have none. It's a tragedy when anyone's a victim of this type of crime, but his level of abuse and brainwashing and intimidation and blackmail and bribery and all that went on here is way beyond a victim of abuse who maybe grows up and has a moment of weakness, and just regrets it for the rest of their life. Different type of situation. This guy was systematically abused young girls. We hear now from the reporter from the Sun-Times that he's aware of 50 cases, 50 young ladies who were abused by R. Kelly. But those charges in 2002 there was a problem with a search warrant. Those charges were dropped. And then the witness, the victim in the case, refused to testify, so those charges were dropped. No, not dropped, but the case fell apart, as we like to say. So that's what happened way back then, way back in 2002. There's some rumors going on. I believe it was even in one of the documentaries that he had some family members who were, shoveling money around for people. Then there was another series of incidents that I wasn't involved in. But before we get to that, before I forget, when I first became aware of the sex tape in 2001, the people who were guiding me in this and retained me in this job were bringing me up to speed. And that's where I heard the whole story about this Aaliyah, this young girl, and Aaliyah, who actually married R. Kelly when she was, I believe, she was 15 years old. He had met her when she was 12 years old, okay? And then he married her when she was 15, and she was provided some kind of fake ID to say that she was 18. And I believe she was provided this fake ID by someone on his own management team. People that worked for him, around him, provided him this fake ID. So this is the kind of situation where the people were unaware of what R. Kelly was up to. When I became aware of this, what was told to me was a sex tape, which I assumed was adults. But then I started hearing the story about how he married this little teenage girl, 15 years old, with fake ID, and he had met her when she was 12. And there's a video of him talking about her before they got married, that she was 14 years old, and he acknowledges that he knew that she was 14. The guy married a 15-year-old girl. Now this girl, Aaliyah, it turns out she dies later on. She was dating Damon Dash, who you might be familiar with. He was a very rich guy and is involved in all kinds of stuff, all kinds of, there's a couple of movies out there about this guy, okay? And she was down there, I believe in the Bahamas, in a Caribbean island, and they all piled onto this little puddle jumper plane. The plane couldn't even take off. It was so overloaded. And it crashes and she dies, again, at a very young age. But going back now, after I became aware of this now, there was all kinds of interviews and video footage of Aaliyah and R. Kelly together at interviews, and people, you could just see their body language and stuff. It was just very bizarre. This was like an open secret that everyone knew what was going on, okay, which is very similar to a case we just had recently against, we had that lawsuit against Disney and that country music producer. There was an open secret. Everybody knew what was going on. A case that I just worked on the past couple of years. So the whole thing with Aaliyah, he married an underage girl and was provided this fake ID by a member of his staff, and was introduced to this young girl, 12 years old, by, I believe, her uncle, or a relative of hers, at least. So one of the important things to understand is that people were aware about this. People in the business of buying and selling this type of information were aware of R. Kelly's contact way back as far as 1994. Now, one thing to keep in mind in all this, and this is actually was on film, okay? After it came out, all this business about the sex cult and how he was brainwashing these young girls, and by now it was just common knowledge that people were coming out and family members were coming out making allegations. They couldn't get in touch with their daughters. Their daughters were estranged from their family. The girls were coming out and doing statements for TMZ and stuff like that. And obviously they were being coached and recorded phone calls and lawyers' offices, all this kind of stuff you can see on these documentaries. But one thing that goes unremarked about these documentaries in this period of time now is that when the family of one of these young girls, okay, went to Trump Tower in Chicago, because R. Kelly was living in Trump Tower, okay, and you might want to look up a previous show I did about a guy named Mel Hall, who was a New York Yankee, who lived in Trump Tower in New York. And it's almost an identical situation where he had a little girl living with him. This guy's in prison right now for his pederast crimes. But he actually took this little girl and went out to dinner with Donald Trump and Marla Maples. And at one point, Trump was saying to this little girl, "What are you doing with him? What are you doing with that guy? You can do better than that." Okay, and we know now when we hear these stories from Mr. Wolf from the book of Fire and Fury about how one of Mr. Trump's proclivities was he liked to hit on the wives of his friends. And when this young girl is talking about how Trump was hitting on her, she says, "Oh, he had a predator vibe." She got off of this. Now, this has been rewritten since then, and that Trump was trying to rescue her. Well, they're living right next door. If you want to rescue her, just call the cops. You know what I mean? Give me a break. But here we have this other incident with R. Kelly, almost identical to Mel Hall, the New York Yankee who lived on the same floor as Donald Trump. Google it, by the way. Many stories out there. Okay, and if you Google it, you'll find that even before the big articles came out about the story, people were talking about this in sports chat rooms about Mel Hall and his behavior. This is no secret. Everybody knew what's going on with this character. I did a whole show about it. But the Trump Tower in Chicago, where R. Kelly lived, and the family of one of these young victims shows up at the Trump Tower there, and they call police, and we want to do a well check. I want to do a well check on my little sister. She's up there with this creep R. Kelly. And the cops show up, and right away, they're intimidated by this big fancy building, big rich people living there. R. Kelly, this music legend, right? And says, "Well, we can't knock down the door. We can only knock politely and ask." But even before they can do that, they got to go to the front, the doorman, right, the concierge desk, and get permission to even go up and knock on the door. So, before they go up, the guy living up there is getting a phone call. "Hey, excuse me, the cops are on their way." Okay, all right. But beyond that, of course, the cops go up there, and Kelly answers the door. He says, "Well, she's not here." Okay, and the cops, okay, can we come in and look around? "No, you can't." "Okay, goodbye. Nice to know you." "Okay. Hey, love that song. Can I get your autograph?" Right, but what happens here is there is no way on the face of this earth, okay, if you look at the way Donald Trump runs his properties, and I talk about that lawsuit with that golf course in California where he would complain when they knew when he was going to come visit, and he would look around and say, "Well, the girls you have working here aren't attractive enough. We need to hire more attractive people to work at this golf course." And it was a sexual harassment lawsuit over that golf course. And so we know that Trump is very hands-on with his properties, with celebrities, with all this kind of stuff. He's really into it, There's no way police showed up to do a well check on a minor, a child being held captive, prisoner, in one of his apartments in Trump Tower in Chicago, and Trump was not made aware of this. There's no way. By the way, too, and there's stories about how these girls were kept in cages up in this apartment. No one noticed the delivery of cages in and out of this apartment building, suspect too, but no one noticed these young girls walking in and out with R. Kelly. There's all kinds of stories of him being out to dinner, getting into big fights with people in nightclubs with these young girls. Again, just with impunity, does whatever he wants, gets away with whatever he wants. The arrogance of this character, who's now facing 10 to 100 years in prison. So, but there's no way that the concierge and the security staff that day was not made aware that there wasn't a building-wide memo put out. Hey, the police were here to check on one of our tenants that they claim that he has prisoners, underage prisoners, young girls being held prison up in his apartment. And there's no way that wouldn't come to attention to Mr. Trump. And there's no way that the head of security at this Trump Tower in Chicago wouldn't be aware of this too as well. And there's no way that the average guy wouldn't have their eye out to see if there's any other activity going on. Now, clearly there was, because we have a conviction. We have a serious conviction here. So how did this go on under the nose of this Trump security? It's right there in their eye, going on right under. What kind of security is that? Okay? And I'll have people contact me. I had some lunatic contact me this week on YouTube telling me about I had done an investigation. There was this article that came out early in 2000 when Trump, in 2016, when Trump was first elected in 2000, right after the election there, right after the inauguration, about, there were 1,400 sexual abuse cases under Trump investigated, more than all of Obama's whole history. Right, I looked into this. I contacted the police officers who ran those cases, and they said these are routine cases. They've been going on year after year after year. There's nothing special about Trump with these investigations, okay? And I reported that, and people still come to me and say, oh, no way, there's secret military tribunals. There's secret investigations. The prosecutors don't know about it. The cops who do the arrests don't know it, but YouTubers, these wacky YouTubers, know more about it than anybody who was actually involved. Now, we've got to take a little commercial break. And then we're going to wrap up on this R. Kelly stuff. That's my personal involvement with R. Kelly, I can tell you about. Then we're going to talk about, when I come back, Mr. Jerry Falwell Jr. and the pool boy and Mr. Granda and that whole saga there, because there's been some interesting developments in that too. Because like the kid who saw the candy and took a bite too big and couldn't swallow it, had to spit it out. That's what happened to Mr. Jerry Falwell Jr. So we're going to be talking about that when I get back. Okay. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, doing a special solo show for you here. I don't usually do them Monday to Thursday on AM/FM radio. Usually I save these for Friday nights. Now on Spreaker.com, Spreaker.com. You can go there for free, sign up for free, get an email notification anytime I do new content. And like I say, I do a show there every Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, just available exclusively to the internet audience, to the podcast people. And it's live. I do it live. So, sometimes I take calls. And if I got all the equipment's working, I take calls. So, that's pretty much all I know about R. Kelly that I'm personally involved with. My own personal experience that I could tell you about is that back in 2001, everyone was aware about these tapes being shopped around, that's for sure. And we thought it was a sex tape, not a child molestation tape, that's for sure. And everyone was aware, too, about this stuff going on with the marriage to this young 15-year-old girl. That was widespread, widely known. Which kind of brings us over now into this situation here with Jerry Falwell Jr. Okay, with Jerry Falwell Jr., I guess I remember I was watching live when Mr. Trump was giving his little speech there at the Liberty University, and when he quoted 2 Corinthians, which everyone knows who's ever picked up a Bible, ever went to Sunday school, went to church. It's 2 Corinthians. Okay, you got 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. And he's quoting something from 2 Corinthians, but he calls it 2 Corinthians, right? And when I heard this, my ears perked up, and I laughed to myself. And I noticed a lot of the students there, too, at Liberty University were laughing. And I kind of tweeted out about it, and then it didn't become a big thing until later on that night. But, I guess so many people who had never opened the Bible in their life were being explained to by their friends, who were familiar with the Bible and friendly to the Bible. We're telling them that's just a ridiculous quote to make when you're quoting 2 Corinthians, to call it 2 Corinthians. Okay? But what we find out now, much more was going on there. And then after that, we get this endorsement from Jerry Falwell Jr. of Mr. Donald Trump. 3 times married, 3 times divorced. All kinds of improprieties with this guy, all kinds of, scandal around this guy. But he's being endorsed as the Christian conservative candidate. And you got to know, a lot of people, I guess, younger than me who come along aren't familiar with Jerry Falwell Sr., who was the head of the Moral Majority and who started the whole right-wing Christian evangelicals being a political powerhouse. Really created the Moral Majority. And he was this pompous, overweight character, full of himself with this fake smile on his face all the time. Got into a lawsuit with Larry Flynn from Hustler magazine, which he lost. Then he got into some lawsuit with the Bakers, Jim and Tammy Baker. We went in there and took over their ministry and kind of stole everything they had. So here we have, he passes away. And here we have his son, who was groomed to take over for him at Liberty University. which was his college. I think the college didn't allow black kids until just a few years ago. You don't quote me on that. I don't believe back in when it first was first around that they didn't allow blacks at this college when Jerry Falwell was running around with the moral majority in the 80s with Ronald Reagan and stuff. Or maybe they had one, They had that one. But anyway, so Jerry Falwell Jr. comes out with this endorsement of Donald Trump. And even I said at the time, this is just so bizarre. Like, what's going on here? And it wasn't until a few years down the road that we started hearing this story about that Jerry Falwell had invested in a hostel in Miami. He and his wife had invested. It was like a lot of money. It was like $1.5 million at this teen hostel where runaway kids and troubled kids would go and stay at this hostel. And it was in the papers for prostitution and drug use there. It was not a nice place. They even had a liquor store where they sold liquor on the property there. Okay, and somehow, for some reason, Jerry Falwell and his wife were partners in this business with this young man named Granda, right? So that story starts floating around. I started hearing rumors about this. And I started talking about it on the air. So I started dropping hints about this on the air. You can go back and find the show. This is way before Let's Hit the News. All right? And then we started hearing stories about that there were photos. There were some kind of photos. We didn't know what this were, but this guy Granda had these pictures. And we find out now that Granda had given somebody, well, Granda was a pool boy. Okay? They had met him at a hotel, and he was like a lifeguard, pool boy / whatever. At one point, they tried to describe this young boy as an aquatics engineer, okay? The Falwells did. And it turns out there was all kinds of different rumors that either Falwell was having sex with this guy, and it was negotiations back and forth, right? Ultimately, Granda gave some pictures to some friends of his that were incriminating or embarrassing to the Falwells, and they tried to extort money from Mr. Falwell. And Michael Cohen, Trump's fixer, gets involved in this, and he steps in, and he reads the riot act on these guys, and they back down, and that saves Mr. Falwell a lot of money. And he enters into a lifelong friendship with Michael Cohen. So what happens next in the news, okay, in the public area, is that Granda doesn't get everything he wants, okay? And when he sells his story, or he gives his story to Reuters, and it's a whole story, and he gives Reuters all these photographs of him, of Jerry Falwell's wife naked, sexual positions, and he's talking about how, I have an affair. I think her name is Becky. Yeah, I have sex with Becky. I have for years. It's gone on for like 5 years. And Jerry Falwell likes to watch. He sits there and watches us do it. Okay? And, I have pictures to prove it. I have text to prove it. All this. I got videos to prove it. Okay? We've only seen a small percentage of this, right? And there was other shenanigans going on, too, as well, where Falwell was caught, with this pregnant girl with her pants unzipped, and he had his pants unzipped, and he's holding a bottle of liquor, a glass of liquor. And then there was another one, too. Oh, yeah, this bizarre thing where he's doing squats at the gym, and he has these two Liberty University co-eds standing on each side of the bar. Just very bizarre stuff. So anyway, ultimately, it all gets out. It all gets out in the news. Falwell's disgraced, and he has to resign from Liberty University, right? Now, before this all came out in Granda, we'll get into that later. Because here's how it works. So Falwell has to resign in disgrace, right? An embarrassment. And little dribs and drabs are coming out about this, too, as well. As a matter of fact, what's his name? Tom Arnold comes out. In fact, I even talked to him off the air via email about this, too. And he goes, oh, yeah, there's other pictures, and there's other pool boys, too. And he goes, and do you know this? Do you know that Falwell still pays Michael Cohen? That Michael Cohen, this is what Tom Arnold says. Okay, and he was all involved in that P-tape, stuff like that. He's got very friendly with Michael Cohen there, even covered up some stuff for Michael Cohen, in my opinion. So he comes in, he says, oh, yeah, Michael Cohen is still on the payroll with Jerry Falwell Jr., told not to talk about Trump's abortions and not to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. He's allowed to go out on this podcast and talk about this other stuff, but he's paid not to talk about this. That's what Tom Arnold says, and he said that in writing. Okay? Now, as a source, I've found Tom Arnold to be very credible. Now, what happens was, now even worse, is that after Mr. Falwell has to resign from Liberty University, he decides to take another bite of that apple. Right? It's just like that kid, right? My eyes are bigger than my stomach. Let me take one more big bite, and I'm going to sue Liberty University because he had a severance. He had a severance package, you know? They gave him money to leave. It wasn't enough. So he decides he's going to sue Liberty University for defamation. And then here we have, comes out this year, not too long ago, Liberty University fires back with their own lawsuit and complaint against Jerry Falwell Jr. I have it in the Patreon in the free section. Liberty University versus Jerry Falwell Jr. Okay? And you're going to love this. It starts out, and it's an easy read. You know, some of it becomes redundant toward the end. You can skip by those parts. But it's an easy read. And the first 8 pages lay out what a prestigious school, what a holy institution Liberty University is. They have such high standards and such strict rules for their students and their conduct and their honor and their morality. It's just beyond, just like the most super duper morality you could have. It's just like, this is, more moral than Jesus. This is the greatest place. They're just teeing up this poor guy for 28 paragraphs. They're going after Jerry Falwell, just teeing him up. And Jerry Falwell Jr. knew there are high standards, and then paragraph 29, the grand allegations. The grand allegations. Let me tell you how morally superior Liberty University is, and let me tell you about the allegations of Mr. Granda, the pool boy, against the Falwells, and his videos, and his pictures, and his activity. And they lay it out. You got to read this. One thing that they do that, when you read a lot of these things, okay, and I've read thousands of them in my life, complaints and responses and replies, motions, all kind of criminal, civil, all of them, especially these kind of allegations too, more recently, past 10 years. And one of the things that they bring up a couple of times, for no reason, what other reason is it to bring up that, what they say is that the Falwells knew Granda had dirt on them. They knew they were involved. They knew he was a volatile character and that he was on the verge of blackmailing them. So they want to placate him. They want to ingratiate themselves into his life. So they're taking him on vacations. They took him to Liberty University there to meet Donald Trump the day that Trump said to. Maybe he got that from Granda. Maybe he got that to Corinthians. Mr. Trump said 2 Corinthians. That's how you pronounce it. Okay, Mr. Pool Boy tells him. Right? Who knows? We don't know. Just like Matt Gaetz brought his friend over there, Nestor, his boy, to meet Mr. Trump. So that's Mr. Trump. I'll meet them all. R. Kelly bringing his little girls over there to Mr. Trump's place. Mel Hall. Okay. That's just a coincidence, Ed. Oh, Ed, you just hate Mr. Trump. Okay. So the lawsuit talks about how Falwells try to ingratiate themselves with Mr. Granda by taking him on elaborate vacations. They took him snowboarding, they took him skiing, they took him on a cruise, and they paired him up with Jerry Falwell's son, Trey. Now that's all. Why mention that? unless you're alluding to the fact that maybe something went on between Trey, not just that Falwell gave his wife to this young man, but also gave his adult son to this young man too as well. Because that's what they seem to be alleging here. Okay? And when they talk about how they tried to placate and appease Mr. Granda because he had volatile information that could embarrass them, well, isn't that the same kind of allegation that Tom Arnold is making about their relationship with Michael Cohen? That they're paying him and going out to dinner with him and celebrating with him and befriending him because the word is out there. Michael Cohen has pictures too. Okay, he's got his hands on some of these photos as well. See, one of the things is too, when you got a situation where you're being blackmailed, right? And then you bring someone in to resolve the blackmail situation, it's so easy for that second guy to come in and blackmail you too. This is why I got clients can tell you, I could bring them on the air, man. I handle a lot of blackmail stuff over the years. I was just thinking about this one recently, where the only way we got through this was because me and the blackmailer both knew the same attorney who was able to put this guy in, read put the blood of Jesus on this guy and wake him up there. Come to Jesus moment, you call it. Anyway, that's how we do it on time. Not bad. Got about 8 minutes. I can go take a nap. So it lays out all this misbehavior of Falwell and how he's drinking too much and how he negotiated this whole new settlement knowing that he was about to get blown up by Granda, and how he never contacted Liberty University and gave him a heads up. Hey, man, this is right around the corner. We might have this guy. Who knows? This whole could have went away, you know? But the deal was he was drinking too much. And even his own wife, Becky, had to call the cops on him one time because he locked himself in a room. He was going nuts. And there was alcohol all over the place. There's a police report on that. So just recently, Mr. Falwell, in his wisdom, decides after he files this lawsuit of defamation trying to get more money out of the people that paid him, trying to get more money from them, they come back and file this lawsuit, this claim against him for defamation and damages to the reputation of Liberty University. It's a solid lawsuit. And now Falwell goes to the judge and says, you know what? They're just filing this claim against me as an attempt to embarrass me, Your Honor. They want to embarrass me with my own conduct, Your Honor. They want... It's bad enough. I had to resign, Your Honor, because of all my bad behavior. And now they want to tell everybody what's already been published in Reuters. So it can't be in a lawsuit. You can seal this stuff. You can file a motion to have it sealed. But no. He wants to throw it out of court because it's embarrassing to him when he's the one that poked the bear with them by suing them first. So you just got to love the chutzpah. To coin a phrase here for the Liberty University former head, Jerry Falwell, Jr. Okay, so that's pretty much it for R. Kelly, and who I don't think we'll be hearing much from. He's facing more charges. He's had some federal charges in Chicago he's facing right now, with two of his employees or co-defendants in that case. So let's see what happens with that. How many of these rats abandoned a sinking ship over there? How many more 100 years can you give Kelly? And have we heard the end of Jerry Falwell Jr.? I don't think so. I think that I think there's going to be a settlement in this case. Liberty University has achieved their goal, and I think they're holding back, and they could pull out more information about people being paired off. That's really what's going on here. It would be my suspicion. Just from reading these documents. I'm not making any allegations against the younger Falwell. I don't know what his behavior is. I'm just pointing out that they pointed it out, that he was paired off with this Granda kid. I should try and get Granda for an interview, right? See what he has to say in all this. Ugh. So keep an eye out. I got some good content coming up. I did an interview with this guy named Nick Bailey, who just put out a documentary film on Heather O'Rourke, the little girl in Poltergeist, and then later on she was in Happy Days. And there's a lot of allegations out there swirling about her death. And so Mr. Nick Bailey really gets to the bottom of this. He's in touch with the family themselves. He's got medical records. He's got litigation paperwork. So, and I think it's a good sober look at a case like this. I said to him at one point, you know, because we all know these characters out there like Isaac Cappy and who's that woman, Fiona Barnett, you know, or Barrett, whoever her name is. And they come out with these wild allegations against people, and basically with no proof whatsoever. Isaac Cappy just said, so-and-so is this and so-and-so is that. We all know it, and that's all he did. Never gave us any kind of proof, any kind of testimony, documentation, nothing. Couldn't get a single lawsuit or anything, and he said, nothing worth any value whatsoever. But just because he said this stuff, it just took off. It became this popular guy with all these YouTube hits and YouTube followers and raising money here and flying there and doing all that stuff. But nothing to corroborate anything he's ever said. Nothing. And one of the things people always says, well, you know, if what I'm saying isn't true, wouldn't I be sued? How come there's no one suing me? And I asked this to Nick Bailey, and he kind of didn't understand what I was getting to him. But I can tell you this, okay? First of all, I got plenty of people I can sue for defamation right now, harassment, stalking. I got all kinds of lawsuits I could sue people for, but they've got no money. They've got nothing. You can pursue these things in other ways. Many times there's criminal, or you're just waiting for them to commit another crime and be on probation or parole, where you can jack them up that way. You're just holding it. Sooner or later, they're going to fall apart. But you know, defamation suits are expensive. But the real question is, if you got some goods, if this family, this little girl, Heather O'Rourke, if this kind of activity really did happen to this kid, she was a victim in this case, her family would have the hugest lawsuit against one of the richest people on the planet. I could find them 25 lawyers who are capable of taking on this movie producer. If there was any kind of physical evidence in these medical reports, and they got all kind of medical examinations and stuff, if there was anything there, there's a lawsuit there. They're not afraid to sue. They sued the hospital. They sued the doctors. So, you know, but the average person just doesn't understand how these things work. And you think, well, if someone's out there making these wholesale claims and allegations and no one's suing them, well, then it must be true. Because wouldn't they be sued? Wouldn't they be silenced? It's just not how it works. And also, too, when if a famous person or a famous institution or a business or something like that sues some flaky nutcase, all you're really doing is drawing more attention to it. And then, you know, you got these lawyers that are paying $700 an hour. You got 5 of them. And on the other side is a pro se defendant, you know, who, God forbid, you know, gets a hold of a couple of paralegals and can respond to your emotions and your complaints. Then now you got expenses galore that can go on forever and more attention drawn to this nut. You know, my advice to a client who's being blackmailed or stalked is ignore it. Because the real thing that these people feed on is attention, you know, is what they really want. They want attention. They want your attention. And when they stalk you, they're stalking you. They want you to know it's them, but just not have enough evidence to convict them. But they're very sloppy in their ways because they want you to know it's them. But they think they're too smart and that you're not going to be able to compile the evidence to prove it's them. And that's usually 0 cases that you can't prove who's behind this kind of activity and stalking. All right, guys. Once again, I rarely do these solo shows on AM/FM radio Monday to Friday, but once again, like I said before, so I don't expect this every night. I don't do this every night. I usually have a guest on. I have a guest coming on. I'm taping with this week who wrote a book about the composer Leonard Cohen. Now, fascinating character, Leonard Cohen, and there's a great documentary film about this guy and his affairs and his relationships with women and his relationships with the psychedelic drugs and all kinds of what a renaissance man this guy was. A creative, incredible creative guy in all levels. So I was fascinated by him, and I'm lucky to get this guest to come on and talk about who wrote a book about him. And I'll be refreshing my memory by watching that documentary film once again this week. All right, guys, thank you so much. Don't forget to check out our Patreon, Opperman Report Patreon. I got that Jerry Falwell lawsuit up there for free. But all the content you hear Monday to Friday, AM/FM radio, we have up there ad-free. You can find it. So thank you so much, guys. Good night.